All right. Welcome back, everyone. You guys know how much we love getting recommendations from all of you.
Yeah, it's awesome. Keeps us on our toes and helps us discover some real gems we might have missed otherwise.
Absolutely. And you guys really wanted us to dig into fixing your Scrum,
Oh, yeah. Lots of requests for a deep dive on this one. Seems like a lot of you are wrestling with Scrum out there.
for sure. And this book definitely doesn't shy away from tackling the tough stuff. Ready to jump in?
Absolutely. Let's do it. I'm curious to see what Ripley and Miller have to say.
So, Chapter 2, Why Scrum Goes Bad,
Mm.
gets right to the heart of it. And what's interesting is they pin most Scrum failures on two main culprits:
Ooh. Lay it on me.
lack of trust and ditching empirical process control.
Yeah, I can see how those would be deal breakers.
And they don't just theorize about it, they give a real-world example. This company that had a total system meltdown on Cyber Monday.
Ouch, that's gotta hurt. What happened?
Well, they had multiple people trying to act as product owner.
Oh, yikes. Too many cooks in the kitchen.
Exactly. Priorities were all over the place. No one knew who was really in charge. And boom, disaster.
So, single empowered product owner. Got it. What else?
Well, even with one product owner, you can still run into trouble if your sprint goals aren't lined up with the company's big picture vision.
Yeah, like running a race without knowing where the finish line is. Pointless.
Totally. And then there's this whole thing about Taylorism creeping into Scrum teams. Familiar with that term?
Vaguely. Isn't that like old school factory style management?
Yeah, think hyper-efficiency, breaking everything down into tiny tasks, workers as cogs in a machine, that sort of thing.
Okay, I see where this is going. Not exactly the vibe we're going for with Scrum, right?
Nope, total opposite. They contrast it with Scrum's emphasis on, collaboration and self-organization.
Makes sense. So, how does this Taylorism thing actually show up in Scrum teams?
Well, they use motivation as an example. Like
Mm-hmm.
in a Taylorist environment, you're motivated by external rewards, bonuses, that kind of stuff.
But with Scrum, it's more about intrinsic motivation, right? The satisfaction of creating something valuable as a team.
Right. And they point out how Taylorism can sneak in through things like micromanagement.
It makes you feel like you're just churning through tasks instead of, actually contributing to something meaningful.
For sure. And they mentioned an obsession with busy work, like focusing on ticking off boxes instead of delivering actual value.
Yeah, been there. So basically, Chapter 2 is a wake-up call to ditch the Taylorist thinking and really build that foundation of trust and shared purpose.
Definitely. Now, Chapter 3, Breaking Bad Scrum with a Value-Driven Approach. She gears a bit. It's all about the values of Scrum.
Values, huh? Sounds a bit touchy-feely.
You might think so, but they make a strong case that these values are actually the bedrock of any high-performing Scrum team.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are these magical values?
Commitment, focus, openness, respect, and courage.
All right, those do sound pretty important, actually. But how do you make sure those values aren't just, empty words on a poster?
Well, that's where the book gets really practical. They provide a bunch of questions to use during retrospectives.
Oh, interesting. Give me an example.
Okay, like, when is it difficult to be open with each other? Or what gets easier when we truly embrace courage?
Whoa, those are pretty powerful questions. Really gets you thinking, huh?
Yeah, it's about moving beyond lip service to actually living these values in your day-to-day work.
Love that. Values and actions. So we've got trust, shared vision, and strong values. What's next?
Chapter 4 is all about the product owner, the mini CEO of the Scrum world.
Right. We saw how multiple product owners can lead to chaos in Chapter 2. What else can go wrong?
Well, they dive into the pitfalls of having a part-time product owner.
Yeah, can't imagine that's ideal. Not enough focus, probably.
Exactly. And they also touch on the problems with proxy product owners.
Proxies, like someone standing in for the actual product owner.
Exactly. They might not have the authority or the deep understanding of the product to make the right calls.
Makes sense. So what's the ideal scenario?
A single, dedicated, empowered product owner who's really invested in the product.
Got it. Any other red flags to watch out for?
Oh yeah, they have a whole section on the commander-in-chief anti-pattern.
Uh-oh. Sounds ominous. What's that all about?
Is when the product owner becomes overly controlling, basically dictating every detail to the development team.
Yikes. That sounds like a recipe for resentment and stifled creativity.
Totally. And remember from Chapter 2, trust and creativity are essential for a healthy Scrum environment.
Right. So what's the antidote to this commander-in-chief problem?
Well, they talk about coaching product owners to build trust with the development team and embrace a more collaborative approach.
It's about empowering the team, not micromanaging them. Trusting them to do what they do best.
Exactly. And speaking of empowerment, they also stress the importance of the product owner having a clear product vision.
Makes sense. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there, or something like that.
A product owner without a vision is like a ship without a rudder.
Right.
Totally lost.
Any tips on how to develop that vision?
They suggest some cool techniques like the one-word pitch.
One-word pitch. Intriguing. How's that work?
Basically, you try to boil down the essence of your product into a single, powerful word.
Like connection for a social media platform or efficiency for a project management tool.
Exactly. It forces you to really think about the core value you're offering.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've tackled trust, values, and the product owner role. What's next on the agenda?
Chapter 5 dives into the product backlog, the team's roadmap.
Ah, yes, the infamous product backlog, where all the dreams and desires get captured and sometimes forgotten.
Huh. Yeah, it can definitely become a beast if not managed properly.
So what are some of the common pitfalls they highlight?
Well, first and foremost, they stress the importance of having a single, unified product backlog.
Seems obvious, but I bet that's not always the case in reality.
You'd be surprised. They've seen their fair share of teams struggling with multiple backlogs.
Oh, I can imagine the chaos that creates. Duplication, conflicting priorities, just a mess.
Exactly. And it totally undermines transparency, which is like one of the pillars of Scrum.
Right. So one backlog to rule them all.
Yeah.
Got it. What else?
They talk about the perils of an overgrown product backlog. Too many items. It's overwhelming.
Like an overflowing pantry, can't find what you need, but having too few items wouldn't be good either, right?
Right. It can leave the team feeling lost, like they don't know what to focus on.
It's about finding that sweet spot, I guess.
Yeah.
Enough to provide direction, but not so much that it becomes paralyzing.
Totally. And then there's the whole thing about consistency in product backlog item, PBI formats.
Ah, yeah, that makes sense. If every PBI is structured differently, it's going to be hard to, estimate effort accurately.
Exactly. They give a clear example, breaking down PBIs into different levels of granularity.
Like what? Epics, features, stories, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, for instance, an epic could be something like improve user onboarding, then a feature could be simplify account creation, and a story could be something like design a streamlined registration form.
Ah, okay, I see. So it's like a hierarchical structure, provides clarity and consistency.
Right. And it helps everyone understand how the pieces fit together. They also make the point that the product backlog should be a living document. It's not set in stone.
Yeah, it needs to evolve as you get new information, as the market changes, as you learn more about your users.
Exactly. A static product backlog is a recipe for disaster.
And of course, they couldn't resist tackling the issue of prioritization, or rather, the lack of it.
Right. An unordered product backlog is like a free-for-all. Stakeholders lobbying for their pet projects, development jumping from one thing to the next.
Sounds chaotic.
It is. They emphasize that prioritization is key. Without it, you risk building features that are nice to have, but don't actually move the needle on the things that matter most.
So, Chapter 5 is all about bringing order and clarity to the product backlog, making sure it's a valuable tool that guides the team, not a source of confusion and frustration.
Exactly. Now, Chapter 6 takes us right into the heart of the action, the development team.
Okay, ready for this? The development team. They kick things off with this story about a health insurance project. Get this, 7 development teams, all organized by competency area.
What, like developers in one silo, testers in another, designers off on their own planet?
You got it. A recipe for miscommunication and delays.
Sounds like a nightmare.
It was. And they highlight the importance of cross-functional teams, where you have folks with all the skills you need to actually deliver a done increment.
Yeah, that makes sense. No more tossing things over the wall and hoping for the best.
Right. And they call out the everyone for themselves mentality, where developers just focus on their individual tasks in isolation.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that happen. Leads to integration nightmares and like a general lack of team spirit.
Totally. They suggest using things like visual workflow maps and work in progress limits to encourage collaboration and make the work more transparent.
Good ideas. Anything else?
Oh, yeah. On the flip side, they talk about the too many cooks anti-pattern.
Too many cooks. What do they mean by that?
Giant development teams. They shared this story about a daily scrum with, get this, 29 people.
29 people. That's not a daily scrum. That's a convention.
Exactly. You can't have a meaningful conversation with that many voices.
So finding the right team size for effective collaboration is key.
Right, and not just falling into the trap of thinking that more people equals more output.
So Chapter 6 is all about finding that balance. Cross-functional,
Yeah.
but not too big. Collaborative, but not chaotic.
Makes sense. And let's not forget about those pesky specialization silos.
Oh yeah, where developers cling to their designated roles and refuse to, like, step outside their comfort zone.
Exactly. Got to break down those barriers and encourage folks to be, more flexible and willing to learn new things.
Totally. It's about fostering a we're all in this together mentality.
All right, we're back, ready to dive into the next chunk of Fixing Your Scrum.
Yeah, let's keep going. Where are we picking up?
Chapter 16. Scrum doesn't fix your problems.
That title's a little ominous, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like a reality check. Scrum's a framework, not a magic wand.
Okay, I see what they're getting at. It can, like, expose problems, but it's not going to solve them for you.
Exactly. It's like imagine a pothole in the road, right?
Okay, I'm following.
Scrum's like the spotlight that shines on that pothole. Makes it impossible to ignore.
Got it. But you still got to do the work to fill it in.
Exactly. And that's where a lot of teams get tripped up. They think, okay, we're doing Scrum now. All our problems will magically disappear.
Yeah, wishful thinking. So what kind of problems are we talking about here?
Well, it could be anything, really. A lack of technical expertise, crappy communication, a culture of fear and blame.
Yeah, I can see how those would be pretty serious roadblocks.
They tell this story about a team struggling with a really complex technical challenge.
Oh,
And they kept trying to scrum their way out of it, but ultimately they needed to bring in an expert, someone with specialized knowledge.
so sometimes you need to call in the cavalry.
Right. Admit you don't have all the answers and be willing to seek help. And then there's the whole thing about Scrum amplifying existing cultural problems.
Oh yeah, if you've got a culture of blame and finger pointing, Scrum's just going to make it worse.
Yeah, it's like putting a magnifying glass over a crack in the foundation.
So chapter 16 is basically a reminder that Scrum's a tool, not a solution. It can help you see things more clearly, but it's up to you to do the work to fix them.
Right on. Okay, let's move on to chapter 17, the value of sustainable pace.
Sustainable pace. That sounds kind of zen. What's the gist of this chapter?
It's all about recognizing that Scrum should be a marathon, not a sprint.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. We often hear about Agile being all about speed, fast-paced development, and all that. But I guess that can lead to burnout if you're not careful.
Exactly. It's about finding that pace that allows the team to deliver value consistently, but without sacrificing quality or their sanity.
Like finding that sweet spot where you're making progress, but not burning yourself out.
Right. They talk a lot about respecting work-life boundaries, making sure people feel comfortable taking breaks, recharging their batteries.
I like that. It's about taking care of the humans behind the code.
Exactly. And they even suggest incorporating things like mindfulness or meditation into the workday.
Oh, interesting. I can see how that could help people manage stress and stay focused.
Yeah, it's about taking a more holistic approach to well-being.
Okay, so sustainable pace. Got it. What's up next?
Chapter 18, Learning and Growing. This one's all about, the importance of continuous learning for Scrum teams.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
The world's changing so fast, you got to keep learning and evolving.
Right. And it's about creating a culture where learning is valued, where people feel safe to experiment, take risks, and, mess up sometimes.
Fail fast, learn fast.
Exactly. They talk about creating opportunities for people to share knowledge, like through pair programming, code reviews, or even just casual conversations.
Yeah, that informal knowledge sharing is so valuable, isn't it?
Totally. And they encourage teams to go to conferences, workshops, take training courses, all that stuff.
Stay sharp. Stay current.
Right. It's an investment in the team's growth. Okay, moving on to chapter 19, Building a Better Future.
Ooh, that sounds ambitious. What are they getting at here?
Well, it's about taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture, Like, how can Scrum be a force for positive change?
Okay, I like that. Not just building software, but building a better world.
Right. And they argue that Scrum principles can be applied to, any type of work.
Really? Any type of work?
Yeah. They even talk about using Scrum to address big, complex social problems like poverty or climate change.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. It's about taking those core principles of collaboration, transparency, and iteration and applying them to, any challenge.
Exactly. And they give examples of organizations that are using Scrum to make a difference in healthcare, education, all sorts of fields.
Okay, so Scrum for good. I'm digging it. What's next?
Chapter 20, the last word. This is the conclusion, where they wrap things up.
So what's their final message?
Well, they emphasize the importance of those core Scrum values again: commitment, focus, openness, respect, encourage.
Yeah, those kept coming up throughout the book.
Right, they're like the guiding principles.
Yeah.
And they encourage readers to view Scrum as a journey, not a destination.
Always learning, always adapting, always striving to get better.
Exactly. And they leave us with this really powerful reminder that Scrum is ultimately about people.
Ah, yes. Back to the human element.
It's about creating a work environment where people can, thrive, collaborate, and make a real difference.
Okay, so it's not just about the software. It's about the people who build it and the impact it has on the world.
Right. And that's a pretty awesome thing to be a part of.
I agree. Now, you said you wanted a close look at each chapter. What are your thoughts on chapters 20 and 21? How do they connect to what we've already talked about?
Well, I think chapter 20 does a great job of bringing everything together. It emphasizes the importance of the human element, the need for continuous improvement, and the power of Scrum to create positive change.
Yeah, it's like a call to action.
Yeah. And then chapter 21, epilogue, looking ahead, is really interesting. They talk about the future of Scrum and Agile.
Oh, yeah. What do they see on the horizon?
Well, they acknowledge that the world of work is constantly changing,
Yeah.
right? And Scrum needs to adapt to stay relevant.
Makes sense. So what kind of trends are they seeing?
Well, they talk about the rise of remote work, the increasing importance of data and analytics, all that stuff.
Yeah, definitely seeing those trends in action.
And they talk about the challenges of scaling Scrum to large organizations, the need for continuous innovation in the agile space.
So it's not just about doing Scrum. It's about doing it well and adapting it to fit your context.
Exactly. They even touch on the potential impact of, AI and machine learning on Scrum and Agile practices.
Wow, that's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's a fascinating glimpse into what the future might hold.
All right, ready for some appendices. Chapter 22, Appendix A, Fixing Your Definition of Done. It's a big one, right? We touched on it earlier.
Yeah, a solid definition of done is crucial. This appendix is like a practical guide to creating one, refining it, making sure it actually works for your team.
They provide a bunch of examples of what to include, like code reviews, testing, documentation.
Yeah, and they stress the importance of involving stakeholders in the process so everyone's on the same page about what done really means.
Makes sense. No more surprises in the sprint review. Okay, Chapter 23, Appendix B, the Agile Manifesto. This is like the holy grail of Agile.
Right. It's the document that started it all. They revisit it here, highlighting its relevance in today's world.
Even though it was written back in, 2001, the principles still hold up.
They really do. It's a testament to how timeless those ideas are. Okay, moving on to Chapter 24, Appendix C, Scrum Resources.
Ah, this is a gold mine for anyone who wants to, really dive deep into Scrum.
Totally. It's packed with books, websites, articles.
A curated list from the experts. Can't beat that.
Right. And then we have Chapter 25, about the authors.
Always curious to learn more about the people behind the words.
Yeah, gives you some context. And finally, Chapter 26, Acknowledgements.
The unsung heroes.
Right, all the people who helped bring this book to life. So there you have it, the whole enchilada.
Phew. We covered a lot of ground.
We did, but it was a fun ride, wasn't it?
Totally. What a great book. So before we wrap things up, let's take a moment to, really synthesize everything we've learned and pull out some key takeaways that our listeners can actually use.
Sounds good to me. Where should we start?
Okay, so, wow. Tons to unpack from Fixing Your Scrum, right? We've really gone deep on each chapter. Now, what can we, really take away from all this?
I know, right? It's been quite a journey. But yeah, I think one of the biggest things that struck me was just how much Ripley and Miller focus on the human side of Scrum.
Oh, totally. It's easy to get caught up in all the, processes and tools and stuff.
Yeah, the mechanics of it all.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's about people, isn't it?
Right. Building trust, working together, creating an environment where everyone feels, valued and empowered.
Exactly. They keep reminding us that teams are made up of individuals, each with their own strengths, weaknesses, quirks.
And that diversity is a good thing.
Absolutely. It's about celebrating those differences, creating a space where people feel safe to speak up, share ideas, even make mistakes.
Yeah, psychological safety, that's huge. And that's where the Scrum Master comes in, right? They're not just there to, keep the trains running on time.
Right. They're more like a coach, a mentor, helping the team develop those soft skills that are so important for success.
Totally. And another big takeaway for me was this whole emphasis on continuous learning and improvement.
Yeah. Scrum's not a one and done kind of thing, is it?
Definitely not. It's a journey, always experimenting, always adapting.
Embrace that growth mindset. Be curious, ask questions. Don't be afraid to try new things and mess up sometimes.
Fail fast, learn fast.
Right. And then I think it's worth mentioning again that whole idea of finding a sustainable pace.
Oh yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in the hustle, the pressure to deliver, deliver, deliver.
Right, but that's not sustainable in the long run, is it? It leads to burnout, mistakes.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it hurts the team and the product.
It's about finding that balance between working hard and taking care of yourself.
Exactly. Make time for breaks, get enough sleep, prioritize your well-being. A happy team is a productive team.
Preach. And, I keep thinking back to one of the first things we talked about, trust.
Oh, yeah, trust is huge. Trust between team members, trust between the team and the product owner, trust with management.
It's like the foundation of everything.
If you don't have trust, Scrum just doesn't work. They gave all those examples of how a lack of trust leads to, like, hiding problems, manipulating metrics, avoiding tough conversations.
Yeah, it creates this whole culture of, like, fear and secrecy. Not good.
And they gave some good advice on how to build trust. Open communication, transparency, being vulnerable.
Yeah, create a space where people feel safe to share what's really going on.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into fixing your Scrum, I'm feeling pretty optimistic, actually.
Me too. This bit reminded me of just how powerful Scrum can be.
It's not just about building better software, it's about building better teams, better organizations, maybe even a better world.
And it all starts with those core values, with trust, with the commitment to continuous learning.
So if you're out there struggling with your Scrum, pick up a copy of this book. It's a game changer.
Totally agree. And remember, Scrum's a journey, not a destination. Keep learning, keep experimenting, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Until next time, stay curious, stay agile, and keep those Scrum flags flying high.